NZXT have finally done it. They're making a motherboard for a platform that people actually care about, which is a nice change from before. Now, the reason that this is exciting is because NZXT motherboards do look quite nice. There are some practical downsides to that nice aesthetic, but we'll get into that a bit later. But before that, we're gonna do a build with the motherboard in it, which is standing right here. And then we're also gonna try and answer an important question with NZXT products these days. Will it catch on fire at some point? But before all of that, it's time for a sponsor spot for today's video. Today's video is sponsored by Skillshare, which is an amazing online learning community with many skills for you to rummage through and learn. Look at all them skills. You can learn how to up your productivity game. Art journaling for self-care is something that Anna's been getting into lately, and you can also learn about plants at home to uplift your spirit in space, which is pretty cool. This is a class by Christopher Griffin, and it's for people who want the positive power of plants that look all nice inside. It's a good way to decorate your house without knowing anything about decoration, if that's something that you're into. As Hardware Canucks has showed all of us. I probably can't talk about them in an ad spot, but that's okay. Skillshare is also affordable at less than $10 a month with an annual subscription. So it means that no matter what terrible things 2021 brings you, you will still be able to learn new skills. The first 1,000 people to use the link in my description below will get a free trial of Skillshare Premium membership. You know, just to dip your toes in there and see how you feel about it before taking the plunge. So with that, thank you very much Skillshare for sponsoring this video. That's a pretty build, right? Although you may have noticed that the final configuration was a little bit different to the whole build process. And that's because this Corsair case, if anything, has too many configuration options, which makes it a huge pain in the butt to decide what you're actually gonna do with it. And with the AIO in the side, the actual AIO pump head bit looked like a brain with like stuff growing out of it because of all the cables. So I decided to move the AIO to the top of the chassis just to kind of help with the aesthetics a little bit. Now, in terms of the NZXT N7 B550 board, there's quite a lot that I like about it. I'm actually a bit of an NZXT motherboard pro at this point, because I've built with every single one they've launched except for the first one, and it's interesting to see the development over time of these boards. The first thing that you'll notice with the B550 is that it has a lot more rear I/O, which is something that always happens with AMD motherboards, and I like that. You don't have to worry about the 3 USB ports you get on Intel motherboards for some reason. It's also got 2 USB 3 front headers, which is good because I always break them on the NZXT boards because of the angle that they're sitting at and how that massive cable of the case comes out. That angle means that you inevitably just bend a bunch of pins trying to put that in. So it's nice having a backup once you inevitably break the first one. It's also got a Hue Plus built into it, which means you don't have to buy an extra RGB controller to use NZXT RGB on this motherboard. I like the fact that you don't need an extra controller. That's one of the things that I hate about RGB. NZXT's BIOSes are also pretty good. They're a bit laggy, but there's not like a bunch of visual noise in them in the way that there is with like all other motherboards. So they're pretty easy to navigate. It's not a very advanced BIOS, but you're not going to be doing extreme overclocking with it, so it's not really relevant in my opinion. It's good enough for what it is, basically. It's also got a pretty good power delivery on it. It's a 12 plus 2 phase, but it seems to be a 6 phase with doublers on it, which is not a bad thing. Asus does that a lot. In fact, this power delivery is very similar to the power delivery that Gigabyte uses on its B550 boards, and it's solid. It stays cool during gaming. The heatsink may not look like much, but I didn't go above 34 degrees Celsius with a 5600X in there, so that's not too bad. I actually initially thought that the motherboard sensor was broken because of how low those temperatures are, but then I did the very scientific test of touching the heatsink, and it was really cool. So it seems like fire may not be a huge issue, at least in terms of VRM on this motherboard. Now, unfortunately, I didn't have a higher core count CPU to test with this motherboard. The 5600X isn't a very heavy load, but it did handle it very well. When it comes to gaming performance, the boost frequencies were in line with what I got on my MSI X570 Tomahawk board, which is the not terrible MSI X570 board, so it's good that it's in line with that. Another thing that I really like about NZXT motherboards is the fact that they don't have more than one motherboard per product stack, right? So it means that they don't have to artificially try and segment their product lineup and get you to buy like a more expensive motherboard for basic ergonomic features like a physical power button or a built-in rear I/O shield or Wi-Fi or stuff like that. Which means I think this is one of the few $220 motherboards that actually has a physical power button on it, which I find really annoying from the other companies. How much does that button cost to put on a motherboard? Now let's get to the problems with this motherboard, and the first one is a bit of a pet peeve of mine with NZXT motherboards, and it comes from that armor that makes it look all nice, but it makes it a huge pain in the butt to mount in a case. The reason for this is when mounting a motherboard, you have the PCB which you screw onto the actual standoff. But with an NZXT motherboard, there's the PCB, and then there's a gap, and then the armor that has a pretty small screw hole in it. Now the size of that screw hole is an issue because it limits the screwdriver bits that you can use, which is a pain in the butt. But then there's the biggest issue. The real problem happens when you drop a screw between the no man's land that is the PCB and the actual armor thing, because that screw has disappeared into the nether realm. Like, it is gone. And if you've already mounted the motherboard in the case, you're gonna have to do this motion with it to try and get the screw out. It's a little bit like trying to get a guitar pick out of the body of an acoustic guitar, but just even more annoying. So yeah, it may look nice, but it definitely has some downsides. Another problem with the armor is the little doors that hide the SSDs. They don't have any thermal pads on them, and it's not like a heatsink material, so it doesn't help with SSD temperatures. And this motherboard comes with PCIe Gen 4, which may mean that you want to get a fancy new PCIe Gen 4 SSD. The problem is most of those have a beefy heatsink on them, and if they have a beefy heatsink on them, you're not going to be able to close the door, and then there's going to be this weird gap in the armor, which doesn't look great. Another thing that I've noticed with those doors is that they lose their ability to close over time. So if you swap out SSDs more than like 5 times, the door is just not going to fit on anymore. It's a problem that I have with the Z490 N7 variant that I have, is that door doesn't stick on, it just like falls off now. So that's something you need to bear in mind. With that, I've kind of run out of things to say for this video, so let's end it there. Hell yeah, thank you very much for watching. If you liked the video, like and subscribe to the channel for more videos like this one, and until the next video, bye bye.